You don't know what this is. Well, you might know what this is, but you don't know what this is. You may have heard something about this in the media, by word of mouth, or even in your favorite rap song, but you don't know what it truly is. At least statistically, you don't. You see, there are many names to describe this thing you see. The hood, the projects, the ghetto, all of it is the same. This is a community full of love, hate, compassion, violence, but really what brings them all together is the truly evil systemic disenfranchisement they've all been subjected to. The hood is not something that you see in the media. The hood is not this glamorous life. The hood is a byproduct of a systemically racist country. So a community like this has been specifically reserved for our nation's most marginalized. And this community is only home to a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of people here in the United States. So when I say you don't know what this is, I'm probably 90% right. But like, why does this even matter anyways, Designing Crib? Why do I even care that most people aren't familiar with the hood? It's not like they're planning on taking a vacation to O Block anyways. Well, this guy's the reason. Well, who is this guy? Who is this guy anyways? Who is this guy I've been seeing on my phone for the past week or so? Well, his name is Ja Morant. And besides being a phenomenal basketball player, he has an even greater come-up story. You see, Ja Morant was born and raised in Dalzell, South Carolina, where the crime rate is double the nation's average. And in that environment of uncertainty and crime and violence, he was able to find a craft. And that craft was basketball. And he just so happened to be pretty fucking good at basketball. And he used that talents of dribbling and dunking the basketball and stuff and got him a nice little scholarship at Murray State. A couple of good seasons here, a couple of March Madness upsets here, and by no one's surprise, he ended up being the second overall pick in the NBA draft. And not only that, he went on to become the 2020 Rookie of the Year. And on top of that, Ja Morant signed a fat bag to the Memphis Grizzlies, and I think it's safe to say he's probably a top 5 player in the league now. So he's doing real good right now. Ja Morant, damn me up, nigga. That's good shit. Ja Morant, through his skills of basketball, was able to find a way to make it out of his situation in Dalzell, and for that, I'll forever commend him. And I wish the story ended there. I wish the story ended with Ja Morant becoming this great basketball player and becoming one of the greatest of all time, next to LeBron James, of course. And he became this beacon of hope for basketball players living in the hood. But unfortunately, you wouldn't be watching this video if this was the case. And there's some things we have to talk about. So the stuff that Ja Morant is under fire for is actually a pretty long list, but let's just go chronologically first. So in May of last year, after the Grizzlies lost in 6 in the Western semis, one of the players on the Warriors tweeted out something along the lines of, "We whooped that ass, nigga." Ja Morant wasn't feeling it. Ja Morant didn't like that. He quote tweeted saying something, "Oh, you a rookie, little bro, stay in your lane." But a fan didn't like that response either. He didn't like that response, so he said, "Hey, Ja Morant, my bad, didn't know you were pussy whipped. It's free to see how hollows feel." What the fuck? What the fuck, Ja Morant? What are you doing responding to this random fan? I swear, I feel like sometimes motherfuckers don't understand. Shit on the internet be forever. Like, everyone can see you, bro. Digital footprint is a real thing. But it does not end here, ladies and gentlemen. Ja Morant, in the beginning of this year, was under fire again for having a pickup game at his house, and there was a little incident that happened. So allegedly, there was a 17-year-old, we don't know who he is and what his relationship with Ja Morant for privacy reasons, but he threw a ball at Ja Morant's head. Whether it was on accident or on purpose, doesn't really matter. After getting hit in the head with a basketball, Ja Morant walks up to this kid and allegedly looks at him, turns towards his boy, says, "Should I do it to him?" and then punches him in the face. Like, oh, whoa, okay, whoa, what are you doing? Like, punching minors, Ja Morant? Are you serious? A very, very, very bad look for Ja Morant indeed, but it does not end here, ladies and gentlemen. Around the exact same time in January, he got in a little heated argument with one of the Pacers players during the game. It got a little chippy, I'm not gonna lie. And usually the beef is just handled on the court, and as soon as the game is over, you guys settle it, go on your merry ways. But Ja Morant said, nah, fuck that. Ja Morant and his boys after the game caught some of the travel team lacking. No, I said travel team, not even a part of the players. Like, we're talking water boys, we're talking like health, medical staff and shit like that. He caught them boys lacking, pulled up all black tinted SUV and pointed some lasers at these motherfuckers. And I'm not saying lasers that like a kid can go buy at the store and fuck with people with. I mean lasers on a gun. Ja Morant and his knucklehead ass friends decided it was a good idea to simulate a drive-by on the Pacers traveling team. And it's just like, at this point, it's like, what the What? And if you thought this was bad, ladies and gentlemen, this story gets far worse. Remember how I told you back in January, around the exact same time, he punched that kid in the face? Well, as of this week, it came out that not only did he punch him 12 more times, and then went back in his house and then grabbed a gun. An actual gun. The investigation is still ongoing, but honestly, Ja Morant isn't making this any better for himself, as the day I'm recording right now, I just opened up Instagram and I saw a video of him on Instagram Live flashing a gun. I mean, at this point, Ja Morant is just becoming cartoonishly hood, and I think it's time for us to have a conversation about where this guy's actually from. You see, Ja Morant is actually from the hood. And the story I told you at the beginning of the video is actually very real, but not in the way you think it is. Usually when you're thinking of come up stories from the hood, you're thinking about your Kendrick Lamars, your LeBron James and whatnot. But Ja Morant's come up story looks very, very different than these two people. When you usually hear about a story of somebody who came from the hood, there's two overall things that tie all of these stories together. It's a broken home and it's poverty. Take somebody like LeBron, for example. He grew up in a broken home as not knowing his father, and he was very, very poor in Akron, Ohio. And somebody like LeBron James serves as the default template as the stereotypical came from nothing story. But when you look at Ja Morant's story, there's not really too much there. You see, Ja Morant grew up in a two-parent household with both his mother and father being college educated, and his father was, teammates with just some like random guy, Ray Allen. I think people really need to talk about the fact that Ja Morant grew up in a household with two parents, and that alone already is a privilege in the hood. I know so many people who would love to have a second parent in their household, but they just only have one, let alone both of them being college educated. And with a college degree being a pretty good predictor of future wealth, that brings me on to my next point. Ja Morant was not a broke nigga. No, he was not a broke nigga. Both of his parents were college educated, so they probably worked a pretty decent job. But not only that, he went to a private school. I'm not the one to pocket watch or anything, but this shit costs money. And this is money somebody like LeBron James definitely didn't have when he was younger. And the fact that Ja Morant was afforded with this privilege shows you how different his come up was as compared to other people I've mentioned. And to put it plainly, Ja Morant had a pretty fucking good upbringing. Honestly, he probably had a better upbringing than most people watching this video. And this brings me to my main point of this section. There's an archetype going around that not a lot of people are familiar with because not a lot of people live in the hood, and it's this hood student athlete archetype. It's this archetype of people who live in the hood, who grew up in the hood, they were raised in the hood, but they weren't really in the hood, if you guys know what I mean. Hood student athletes are the ones in the streets selling drugs and gangs, participating in some hood shit, you know what I mean? They're too busy out grinding, working on their craft, trying to make it out the hood someday. And this is by no means a shot at hood student athletes. I mean, shit, I'm one of them. But it's a different interest of somebody like Ja Morant versus your average hood nigga. And usually you end up with somebody like Ja Morant who have friends who are indeed with the shits, but he himself is not. And the result of all of this is Ja Morant acting like Riley Freeman from the Boondocks. When you see Riley Freeman running around trying to do thug shit in the Boondocks, you're just like, nigga, go back to your nice ass crib in the suburbs, bro. You don't have to keep doing this. There's something about Riley Freeman and Ja Morant that I find really interesting. That even though they don't have to do these things, they don't have anything to prove, they still do it anyways. And that just begs the question, what's going on inside? Even though Riley and Ja don't really have to act like this, they don't really have anything to prove, they feel like they kind of have to anyways. And I think the core motivator for this type of behavior is the drive or the need to protect one's masculinity, and more specifically, black masculinity. Some guys are always out trying to affirm their masculinity to others, because if they don't, they themselves don't feel masculine, and in turn, they don't feel themselves. Because who are they without their masculinity? And there are many different ways to affirm/validate your masculinity, but one popular one amongst men, especially black men, is affirming it through means of fear or intimidation. And the reason why I say black men, because there's this parallel that exists between being a black man in America and always proving your masculinity through fear or intimidation. And this has a lot to do with the violent nature that a lot of these black men are growing up in, or the media portrayal of black figures and negative stereotypes being perpetuated on the black men. But that's just that's a whole different can of worms I won't open in this video. But the main point I'm trying to say is that for somebody like Riley Freeman or somebody like Ja Morant, fear and intimidation is the avenue they address to try to affirm their masculinity. And the logic goes like this. If I, as a man, make the man in front of me or anybody else watching me fear me, they will, by proxy, respect me. because they're fearful of the power I possess over them. And that respect that I'm gaining from this interaction, that respect that I'm getting, it feels good. Respect feels good to me. And respect, more specifically being respected as a man, is something that a lot of men hold really crucial to their identity, because if they lack that respect, they feel less like a man, and by in turn less like a human being. But this method of gaining respect doesn't always work because it counts on others fearing you. But when you're somebody like Riley Freeman or John Morant, you're afforded with a pretty special privilege. Since not too many people are from the places where John Morant is from, people who are on the outside usually fear that environment. The only depictions they see of the hood are in media and in rap, and it's just this violent, shoot 'em up, bang bang culture that they don't really fuck with. And if these outsiders are unfamiliar with or in fear of the places you're from, it's pretty easy to intimidate them. All you have to do is act like you're from those places and pretty much is game over. They're running back to their nice suburban homes. So for somebody like Riley Freeman and John Morant, pulling the hood card in spaces with people who aren't really familiar with the hood is a pretty risk-free and valid way to get respect from them. But this only works to a certain extent, because if you pull this hood card thing and take it to its absolute extreme, like I don't know, training a laser and traveling parties, threatening to shoot people on Twitter, beating up a teenager and then flashing a gun at him, it kind of has the reverse effect. The more you try to intimidate these outsiders and the more you try to prove you're from the hood to these outsiders, the less respect you get. Because it's like, did you really think that 17-year-old didn't respect you already, John Morant? Did you really think the random NBA fan on Twitter didn't respect you as a human, John Morant? And instead of being this big bad NBA Grim Reaper you always wanted to be, you kind of just become this laughing stock of the NBA community. And now people are just looking at you as some sort of cartoon character and unironically looking at you like Riley Freeman. And this situation is already bad as is, because John Morant now is jeopardizing his spot in the NBA and essentially millions of dollars just trying to prove himself to some random people who don't give a fuck about his past life. But it's not only John Morant and his close friends and family that his antics affect. And after talking with my close friend and ultimately being the reason for making this video, I realized that what John Morant is doing has an effect that truly is heartbreaking. For Your Eyes Only is a song written by J. Cole, in which he adopts the perspective of his childhood friend James, who was unfortunately murdered. And in this song, James is writing an open letter to his daughter, who he left behind days before his murder. And in this letter, he explained things in his childhood like his father passing away, his mother being an addict, lack of economic mobility in his neighborhood, and a list of other things that made him turn towards the bleak nature of street life. He admits to himself that he became submerged in the hood. He began to idolize and glorify everything that came with it, the good and the bad. He loved moving dope on street corners. He loved being involved in violent affairs. He loved being the most feared by his peers. But now, James realizes this is all a mistake, and that he's been led astray to live a life void of love and prosperity, but instead, one full with anxiety and hopelessness. And in the second to last verse of the song, James comes to terms with the harsh reality he was dealt with, and he gives this one piece of advice to his daughter. Life goes in cycles. Maybe you'll date a nigga just like me. I hope not. I'm tired of dope spots and fiends that smoke rock. I've seen far too many niggas hope drop. I'm writing this because me and the devil had a dance. Now I see death around the corner, apologizing in advance. Don't know if I ever had a chance. And it's with these words you figure out that as James is living out his last days, he realizes he never really had a chance to succeed in the first place, and that he's just another victim of the trap that has been set in his community to engage in street life. But with that, he hopes his daughter will break free of this cycle and one day find somebody who will live a better life than him. The song ends with a message from J. Cole saying how he was the realest he's ever met, but he just truly hoped there was another path for him to go down. The story of James reveals a perspective that only people who are from the streets can experience, and this perspective is crucial in understanding what really goes on within these neighborhoods, because without it, the core sentiment of living in the hood, trying to make it out, can be misconstrued into something it's not. When I see someone like John Morant, a multi-millionaire athlete, assaulting fans, training lasers on traveling squads, and overall trying to keep with this hood persona even though he's out, I think of James. Now, if James was presented with the same opportunity he did, an opportunity to escape poverty and change his life forever, he would run with it. He would run with it so far that looking back wouldn't even be a thought in his mind. And what he definitely wouldn't do is go out of his way to prove himself to be tough for a bunch of people who don't even have the slightest clue as to what he's been through. James is a story of millions of people who failed to rise above their circumstance and have been crushed under the bearing weight of systemic marginalization. John Morant is the beautiful story of the chosen one who did, But instead of being a beacon of hope for people like James, he turned into a caricature of James for the whole world to scrutinize and laugh at and point at. And that I simply can't get behind. So with that, I have this message for you, Ja. Words can't express how happy I am you were able to make it out. But please, 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 for James's sake, remember why you did it in the first place. Thank you.